What's going on, guys? It's me, Zachary Steele, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. Today, I'm going to go over some players I've identified as buy low and sell high candidates after week one. Trading is definitely my favorite thing to do in fantasy football. I really can't stop thinking about it during the season. I think it's really the best way to make your team better throughout the season. Waivers is great and all, but there's nothing like making a really good trade. So feel free after the video to comment any trade questions you have. If you got a trade offer on the table, hit me up. I'll help you get back to you. We can talk through together. Love talking trades. My favorite thing is fantasy. So yeah, I'll go through each position and players I've identified as buy low and sell high candidates. Sort of explain why, and then you guys can let me know how you feel about the players I identified. So for starters, at quarterback, I think a prime buy low candidate is Lamar Jackson. Obviously, he had a pretty lackluster performance on Monday night with 2 fumbles and only 1 touchdown. But he still ended up around 21 fantasy points in standard scoring. That's just because his rushing ability gives you such a high floor that you really can't go wrong playing him week to week. And I think that he's a quarterback that not only burned people last year because he was drafted as number 1, maybe number 2 quarterback in fantasy and did not meet those expectations, but now he looks like, or he doesn't look like it, but if you're being really casual about it, you can make an argument that it looks like he's sort of looking to burn fantasy managers again. He really didn't look that sharp throwing the ball. I don't know that he necessarily improved that, but the fact of the matter is rushing ability gives you such a high floor that what you saw this week is probably as bad as he's going to get for him this season. I think he's somebody that you can get cheaper than you would have just a week ago, and I'm not worried about Lamar at all. He's going to be a top 5 quarterback for the rest of the season, at worst top 7. And I don't know that it'll cost that. I think you could maybe even get away with trading a Jalen Hurts caliber quarterback for him, and I would do that in a heartbeat. So another quarterback I'm looking to buy low is actually Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, they came off the worst game of Aaron Rodgers' career. They lost 38-3 to the Jameis Winston-led Saints. And really, they just looked horrible. Rodgers didn't look like he wanted to be there. Nobody else on the team seemed very happy to be there. And it was bad. But the fact of the matter is, it's just one game. The fantasy manager that owns Rodgers in your league probably is super upset about him. I know in my league, the manager's basically looking to give Rodgers away. And he's somebody that you can get really cheap, especially after so many other quarterbacks blew up in week 1. If the Rodgers manager was watching that same game, he watched Winston throw for 5 touchdowns, and I'm sure that stung. So basically, I think that you can get Rodgers for pretty much free at this point in time, and he's going to be a top 10 quarterback for the rest of the season. I'm not worried about him at all. He's going to have a really nice opportunity to get right this week on Monday playing the Lions and just let 49ers just stomp them. I don't care what the score says. That game was a blowout. So yeah, go get Aaron Rodgers at the right price. Should be really cheap. If you need a quarterback, he's someone I'm looking to add. So another guy I'd be looking to add if you're really thin at quarterback, if you're someone who sort of waited till the end of the draft, would Ryan Tannehill. He's over the last couple of years been a really quality starting quarterback in fantasy and doesn't really get the respect for it. And then the Titans went out and laid an egg in week 1. Titans are not going to be that bad. I know they lost their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, the Falcons, but I don't think there's really going to be much turnover there. They're going to get back to running the same offense. They run with Derrick Henry, throw play action. They just got out behind early, and the Titans aren't a team that are built to necessarily come from behind. I think they're going to have a hard time doing that regardless, but they're going to win more than half their games this season. They're going to be a lot better game scripts for Tannehill, and honestly, they're going to probably have a pretty explosive week this week against my favorite team, the Seahawks. Seahawks are not necessarily a great defense by any means. I do sort of expect that game to be a shootout. And his price will be right back up after this week. AJ Brown, Julio are going to have good weeks this week, and Tannehill is going to be just fine. And the last guy I'll mention here is Justin Herbert. He actually put up a really, really quality performance against the Washington football team this last week, and it just didn't show up with the touchdowns. They only had 1 passing touchdown, and the offense as a whole only scored 2. And I don't think that's something that's going to continue this season. Washington's a really legitimate defense. They're going to be somebody that gives any offense problems, but Herbert still looked really good against them. He broke 300 yards. I think he's somebody that you're going to be able to rely on as a top 6 or 7 quarterback week in and week out. I prefer him to Rodgers the rest of the season. I believe I'd rank him. We'd go Justin Herbert, then Rodgers immediately after. But Herbert's going to have a really good season. He definitely let fantasy managers down a little bit this last week. But we all knew that was going to happen. Washington football team is really tough defense. He was never going to light it up this last week, and he still did a really good job of showing that he's actually improved as a player, and that's something I'm actually really excited about. So go get Justin Herbert if you don't have a locked-in quarterback. He's going to be awesome the rest of the year. Then just a couple of quick sell highs. First off, obviously, I think you want to sell high on Jameis Winston. I do believe Jameis Winston's going to have a pretty quality season as an NFL quarterback, but I don't know that it'll necessarily have when it's a fantasy quarterback. He threw the ball 20 times this last week. More than a third of his completions were touchdowns. That's not sustainable. I'm not saying, none of you are saying he is going to have 5 touchdowns a week, but I think you'll be looking more at the 1 or 2 touchdowns a week. That's going to be a team that looks to run the ball with Kamara and just play good defense. And they're going to win a lot of games doing that. Winston's not going to put up the stat line he did there, especially until Michael Thomas is back. I don't think this offense is going to be very explosive. So if you can sell him for a locked-in start, if you could trade Jameis Winston for Ryan Tannehill or maybe even Aaron Rodgers, you should do that in a heartbeat. Then Matthew Stafford, I would definitely sell high on him. He had a really great week 1, really great start to his career as a Los Angeles Ram. But the fact of the matter is, he doesn't really add anything on the ground with his legs. That really makes it so he does not have a very safe floor at all. You're going to need 2 touchdowns a week for him to be fantasy viable, and you need 3 for him to pay off as a top 5 option. I don't know how often he's going to do that. I could be wrong, and he could throw 50 touchdowns this year, but I don't personally see that happening. And I think that the more likely scenario is that the Rams play really good defense, end up in a lot of middle of the road scoring games, and any of the games the rushing the touchdowns go to the running backs, Stafford's going to have a hard time putting up top 10 numbers, and it's just not something I'm excited about in my fantasy roster. Cool. So now we're moving on to the running back position. My number 1 buy low this week is Najee Harris. He was on the field for 58 of the Steelers' 58 offensive snaps. You're not going to find that kind of workload really anywhere else in the NFL. I get it. The Steelers didn't look great this week. But their offense is better than that. They just got into a ground and pound game with the Buffalo Bills. The offense should get better as the season goes on. Najee's a talented player. And even if he can't really get anything going on the ground with how bad their offensive line is, he's going to be involved as a receiver enough that he's going to have a really safe floor. And I do think Najee Harris is going to be a fringe RB1 the rest of the season. And he really did just go out there and make fantasy managers absolutely upset. I think it's a really great opportunity to buy low on rookies that disappointed week 1 because they don't have anything. Their fantasy managers only have that week 1 to compare anything to. So they've never seen Najee do anything well for them. I think that better days are ahead for Najee. He's going to be a locked-in starter the rest of the season, and I would be happy to have him on my roster. Another guy I'll talk about here is Austin Eckler. Sort of the same thing with Justin Herbert. He actually looked pretty good, even though he was nursing a hamstring injury. He was never going to light it up this week against the Washington football team. That's a really stout defense. But he got red zone carries on 4 separate drives, and that's something that I think we were all really looking for out of Austin Eckler this year, is that the big knock on him has been that he doesn't get the red zone work, and it's really clear that he does here. He had the rushing touchdown from inside the 20 this week. I know a lot of people are worried that he actually saw 0 targets, but only Justin Jackson saw a target out of the backfield in this team. He was banged up. He wasn't getting the full workload that he will be going forward. On top of that, he ran 25 routes on 50 passing plays he was in for. So he was very involved in the receiving game, at least should have been. He just didn't happen to get targeted. Better days are ahead for Austin Eckler. He's going to have a really great blow-up game this week against Dallas, and that price is going to be right back up. So if you want Austin Eckler at a bit of a discount, this is probably the only week you're able to do it. So go get Austin Eckler. I would definitely buy low on Aaron Jones as well, pretty much for all the same reasons I said with Aaron Rodgers. That offense is not going to be bad. They're going to be a top 10 offense in the NFL this season. It's really fluky week 1. They're going to have a really great opportunity to get right on Monday. The Lions just let Elijah Mitchell rush for over 100 yards, and I don't think there's any reason that Aaron Jones can't do that this week. Aaron Jones is the locked-in running back 1 the whole season. Don't let one game scare you. Week 1 is often the fluke in the NFL. And Aaron Jones managers are probably a little upset about him. I'd be more than happy to go make an offer for Aaron Jones. Another guy I'm actually looking to buy low on is Mike Davis. I get it. That whole offense was anemic and really couldn't go all moving at all. But the promising thing was that Mike Davis was actually really involved as a pass catcher in this offense. He was one of the lone bright spots from my viewpoint, actually watching the game. He's going to have a hard time running the ball for yardage, and I think that's okay because this is going to be a team that's down a lot. And really where Mike Davis was ever going to make up value for you was going to be catching the ball. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to get 5 targets, maybe even 5 receptions a game this season. And that makes him a really actually valuable and startable running back, low-end RB2 on any given week. Even this week against the Buccaneers, I think he's going to have plenty of opportunity to perform. I think a lot of people were going to be looking to dump Mike Davis after how bad that offense looked he didn't necessarily light anything up, but I'd be really happy to have Mike Davis on my roster. It's so hard to get quality running backs. You can start week to week in fantasy. I think Mike Davis will be a guy that you can plug in on any given week. I would like for him to be my RB3 on a roster, not my RB2. But if you're really thin at running back, you can get by with him as your RB2. And if you wanted a third running back, just give yourself some depth. Mike Davis is a great option. And then lastly, I got Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. He was on the field for, I want to say 93% of the Chiefs offensive snaps this week. I get it. It didn't necessarily materialize for very many points, but it's sort of a similar thing with Zeke on Thursday night, which is that the Browns have a really good run defense. The Chiefs just had no incentive to run the ball, and they chose not to. And when they did, obviously it didn't work great. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire was involved. He was on the field plenty. There's going to be so many opportunities for him to succeed, and the offense is going to put up 30 points every game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be a fringe RB1 this season, and I think that the fantasy manager for him was probably pretty upset with just the performance they saw, but I was actually relatively encouraged looking at it, just from a usage standpoint. Better days are ahead for Clyde. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 running back by any means, but he's definitely going to be startable week to week, and I think he's going to have some blow-up games, and get him pretty cheap right now, I think. And then just 3 running backs I'd be looking to sell high on. Number 1 is Jamal Williams. He was only on the field for 35% of the snaps for the Lions, and yet he saw almost as many touches as DeAndre Swift, who was on the field for 67%. I believe that to be fluky. On top of that, Jamal Williams had a 25-point fantasy outing, and 11 of those 25 points came in the final 4 minutes of their game when they got the ball back down 41-17. So 14 points is fine. I think Jamal Williams is going to be a startable asset throughout the season. I think he's going to be a guy you can play in your flex or as your RB3 or your RB2 in a pinch. But this is a DeAndre Swift's backfield. DeAndre Swift was never seen an injury and still got a workhorse role. There's going to be enough passing volume to go around between those 2 running backs. They're both startable, but I don't think that Jamal Williams is going to be nearly what he put up in week 1. And I think that even going to the Swift manager, it's something I've been looking to do in my leagues. If I don't have DeAndre Swift, if I have Jamal Williams, I'm going to the DeAndre Swift manager and seeing what I can get from them. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense to own both of them. It gives you them a start every week, and I think you can get the most value you'll ever be able to out of Jamal Williams this week. Another guy I'm looking to dump is Melvin Gordon. Obviously, he had that big, huge 70-yard touchdown run that really helped his stats this week, but he had less touches or less carries than Javonte Williams. That's actually really concerning if you're a Melvin Gordon owner, because you don't often see rookies get that sort of snapshot right away. I thought it was going to be sort of a scenario where Melvin Gordon was the workhorse week 1, and you'd see more and more Javonte Williams over the course of the season. It does look like it's going to be at least a 50-50 split, and then Javonte is probably going to take over as the season goes on. Melvin Gordon's stat line obviously was not great without that 70-yard run. I think Javonte Williams looked like a better player, although Melvin Gordon's no schmuck. Melvin Gordon, I believe, is RB11 right now. After week 1, I don't think he's going to finish anywhere near that on the season, and I'd be really happy to move him for somebody that I can trust starting the rest of the year. Then another guy I'd be looking to sell high on is Mark Ingram. He had 26 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. The Texans aren't going to win very many games this year. I don't think that's a shock to anybody for me to say that. In fact, I won't be shocked if that was the only game they'll win this year. And they're going to need to be winning for Mark Ingram to be valuable. Obviously, he's never going to see 26 carries again in a game this season. And I just don't see a scenario where even the touchdown happens very often. This is going to be an offense that's a really hard time putting points on the board. So I don't think you have very much touchdown upside with Mark Ingram when you're definitely not going to get the same volume you got. So if you can trade him for anybody that's startable, I would do it. I personally don't even really think he's worth a roster spot. But I think a lot of people view him as he is a name. And he had a pretty good week 1, so I would certainly move him if you could. So at wide receiver, the number 1 buy low for me is Calvin Ridley. There are better days ahead for this Atlanta Falcons offense. Calvin Ridley is a true alpha receiver in the NFL. That's really about it. Calvin Ridley is going to be a top 5 receiver in fantasy this year, barring something crazy like the Matt Ryan injury. He actually started out okay this week, and things just really fell apart for the Falcons as the game went on. Really, it's actually probably going to have a really good week this week, even though it's a tough Buccaneers defense. The Buccaneers secondary is really banged up. You saw what the Cowboys were able to do with them against them with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. This is probably going to be your best chance to buy Calvin Ridley low because he's going to have a blow-up game this week, and I don't see that happening again. Another guy I would like to buy low on is Allen Robinson. I personally own a lot of Allen Robinson leagues, but he had 11 targets and it materialized to 35 yards. That's pretty ridiculous. It's really hard to do that poorly. And the Rams defense is really good. They have Jalen Ramsey. He's really good at shutting down number one guys. But this week they play the Bengals, who just let Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and the rest of the Vikings receivers really put up a lot of passing yards against them. I don't think the Bengals are a defense that scares anybody. Allen Robinson's going to have a get right game this week. I expect him to finish with around 100 yards in a score. And obviously, when a really great player struggles in prime time in week one, that's a really good opportunity to buy low because a lot of people watched that game and a lot of people saw Allen Robinson letting them down. So he's certainly somebody that I'd be looking to add. Another guy to be looking to add low on is Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, he finished the week with 0 points. And I'm not saying that I would necessarily be looking to trade nearly what he was drafted for, but I've seen some leagues where Ayuk has even been dropped. Ayuk's going to have starting value as the season goes on. I don't know when that's going to happen, given that apparently he's got a hamstring injury nagging him, and I think there's some other issues keeping him off the field. But Brandon Ayuk's a really talented player. 49ers offense is going to be one that does all right. I think it'll be a little hard to predict week to week between him and Devo and Kittle, which one's going to have a blow-up game. But Ayuk is more than worth rostering, and he will be worth starting as the season goes on. I think that the owner for Brandon Ayuk will be more than willing to get rid of him. So yeah, buy low on Brandon Ayuk. Another guy I'm looking to buy low on is Julio Jones. Sort of a similar scenario to Ayuk, where I'm not looking to trade a whole lot, but Julio had a really bad week one. A lot of people are going to decide, okay, he's washed. He's over 30. Sit for Julio. I don't think that's necessarily the case. The Titans are actually going to be a pretty good offense this year. I don't care what week one showed. And Julio's going to be involved. I expect them to exceed something around the lines of what Corey Davis put up for them last year, which was low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 value. I think that's about where I value Julio Jones at. He's obviously not the Julio of old, but he's going to be startable, and he's going to be somebody that will have a blow-up game or two this season because he is still Julio. And he's a guy that I think playing in your flex slot every week gives you a lot of upside, and he'd be somebody that I'd be really happy to own. I think you can trade a DJ Chark, we'll talk about later, for Julio. I'd most certainly do it. And the last guy I'll talk about here is Terry McLaurin. I think a lot of people are really worried about the injury to Ryan Fitzpatrick and what that does to McLaurin's value. But the fact of the matter is McLaurin's never had a good quarterback, so him missing out on Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't really change much for me. Taylor Heineke actually looks pretty good. I think that the offense isn't really going to slow down much with him. And Terry McLaurin is an elite player, and elite players are sometimes just quarterback proof. Terry McLaurin's one of them. He's going to be a low end or a high end wide receiver 2 the rest of the season, which is about what he was getting drafted as. The Fitzpatrick injury doesn't really change my outlook on McLaurin much, and I'd be really happy to get him at a discount after that injury. And then some guys I'd be looking to sell high on. Common theme here is all of them scored a lot of touchdowns. Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, Deebo Samuel, and Corey Davis. Adam Thielen's not the number one in Minnesota anymore. I know he looked like the part against Cincinnati this week, but Justin Jefferson is very talented. He's going to have a really great year, and I don't think this is going to be an offense that puts up that many points week to week. They definitely want to run the ball and play defense, although the defense didn't really inspire you at all. Adam Thielen is not going to have 2 touchdowns every game, and I think that he's a big name, and he's coming off of a really big game, and he's somebody that you can get. Like, I would trade Adam Thielen for Terry McLaurin. I think you can most certainly do that. Or I would trade him for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. A trade I could see happening, and I would be more than happy to accept on those trade offers. So just shop around Thielen. This might be the best week he has all year, and I'd be more than happy to. I'd rather dump a player early than late, basically. With DJ Chark, he had 3 catches for like 70 yards and a touchdown. DJ Chark is definitely a talented player, but I think that this receiving core is going to be too crowded with him, Jones, and Shenault. I think Chenault's going to be the only one that can return consistent value for you. I know Chark led the team in targets with 12. That only turned into 3 catches. I think Chark's going to have some good games, some bad games. He's certainly okay to have and start in your flex, but I think that he's a big enough name given the season he had 2 years ago, and coming out of the gates with that high of a target share and receiving output really makes him a pretty valuable trade asset. And if I can trade him for somebody that I can trust week in and week out, I've seen DJ Chark for Myles Gaskin offers around. Somewhat low-end RB2s for DJ Chark. I would be more than happy to do. I would trade DJ Chark for Mike Davis, stuff like that. Deebo Samuel, sort of for the same reason as Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel is a really talented player, but I think it's going to be really hard to predict the Niners offense week in and week out. 1 week Deebo is going to have a great game. 1 week Kittle is going to have a great game. The next week you're going to have Elijah Mitchell and JaMycal Hasty combined for 200 rushing yards. It's just not an offense that I necessarily want to trust anybody week in and week out outside of George Kittle in. Who knows, with Elijah Mitchell, he could end up being a really awesome asset. But Deebo Samuel is a pretty respected name in the fantasy community and just put up a monster performance. He was a clear #1 receiver in that offense this week, but I don't necessarily know that continues throughout the whole course of the season. And I think you can get quite a bit for Deebo, so I'd most certainly look to trade him. And then Corey Davis didn't do much to the start of the game, and then he ended up catching 2 touchdown passes. I think Corey Davis is going to be really startable every week this year, but I don't think he's going to be a high-end wide receiver 2. I think he'll end up being a lower-end wide receiver 2 or high-end wide receiver 3. I view him and Julio in pretty much the same light, but I think you can get quite a bit for Corey Davis. He's going to have a tough week this week against the Patriots defense, so his value is going to go down after this week. So this week's definitely the best week to move on from Davis. And then the last position we'll talk about is tight end. A lot of tight ends had bad weeks this week. Top of the list being Mark Andrews. He had like 3 catches for 29 yards. I'm not worried about him at all. I'd be grabbing him at all if I can. I've got a lot of trade offers out there for Mark Andrews. George Kittle, sort of for the same reason I talked about with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. George Kittle is going to have better weeks. They were in a really just positive game script against the Lions. They didn't need to throw the ball very much, and Deebo Samuel did pretty much all the work when they needed to. George Kittle's extremely talented. I think people are maybe a little bit worried after that week, especially coming off of the injuries coming off of, but George Kittle's going to be fine. He's going to be a top 3 fantasy receiver tight end this season, and I'd be more than happy to trade for him. Kyle Pitts had a pretty rough week 1, but he did have 4 receptions for 31 yards. Honestly, not that bad at the tight end position, and I think the better days are ahead for him and this whole offense. And then Robert Tonyan, whole Packers offense is going to get better. Tonyan was obviously a dud. Tonyan is still going to be a top 10 tight end, and he'd be somebody that if you don't have one of the top 6, I'd be more than happy to roster and start each week. And then 2 guys I'd be looking to sell high on are 1, Rob Gronkowski. I get it. Gronk's fun. We all love him. And he had a really awesome game on Thursday against the Cowboys, but I just don't know that he can continue that for the whole season. There's too many mouths to feed in Tampa Bay, and I don't think that Tom Brady is going to throw for 4 touchdowns every week, although he might. Gronk actually looked pretty good. I think he'll be a startable tight end the whole season, but I think that the name associated with the production you got right there, especially because he was either undrafted or a lot of people drafted him along with a higher end tight end. He was your set backup. You can get a really startable asset for Rob Gronkowski. I'd be more than happy to do it. And then Juwan Johnson for the Saints caught 2 touchdowns this week, had less targets than Adam Trotman. He's not going to be a thing. If anybody in your league wants him, I'd be more than happy to trade him and try and just extract value from the touchdowns he put up against Packers. So with that, that'll be it for this video. That's a pretty long one. If you disagreed with any of my buy lows or sell highs, let me know in the comments. If you have any trade questions, any trades you're thinking over, hit me up in the comments. You can message me on Twitter, and my Twitter's right there. I'll be more than happy to help you through it. Love doing this stuff. We'll get you guys a start sit video, and I'll just go over some rankings probably Friday or Saturday. Still trying to decide what day of the week I want to do that video on. And let me know if you guys think this video should come on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. I did think that maybe I did waivers a day late, so maybe I should do a waiver video Monday night, and then just add a disclaimer for anything that happens on Monday, and then do my buy low, sell high on Tuesday. But with that, if you like the video, please be sure to like the video. Quick subscribe really helps. Got a goal of hitting 500 subscribers by the end of the season. I get it. It's quite a goal. It's got a ways to go, but I like to shoot high. It really means a lot. You guys take the time to watch this video. So with that, have a great rest of your night, and thank you guys for watching.